going about its ordinary life, completely unaware that in just a few days, it will die one of the most horrifying deaths imaginable.
This is about the parasites.
Chinese mantises were introduced to America, they were seen as perfect pest killers. But the new predator quickly found easier prey, the smaller native mantises. It was bigger, stronger, and could overpower them in seconds. The reason the native insects were disappearing seemed obvious. The introduced species was simply
bigger cuz, eating cuz.
This is where things get interesting.
Cause he hungry cuz.
Mantises were already perfectly capable of controlling pests themselves, so in Washington County, Mississippi, researchers collected young mantises from overgrown areas near
shout out to the M.
fields and brought them back to the lab. They wanted to see how effectively
shout out to the M gang, for real.
Instead,
For real, for real.
one by one, the mantises themselves began to die. Of the 64 mantises they collected, 57 either died or would die later. There were no signs of a fight on their bodies. No one had bitten off their heads or torn apart their legs. Almost the entire body remained intact. Almost, because a hole appeared in the abdomen of every dead mantis, as though something had cut its way out from the inside. At first, the researchers assumed the damage occurred after death, but soon, one of the mantises that was still alive began twisting its body in a strange way. Within minutes, its abdomen split open and a creature crawled out, one that had been growing inside it the entire time.
In 57?
Before we watch this mantis die one of the most horrifying deaths
Show us, brother.
There's something you need to understand. A praying mantis is essentially a free worker that helps keep pest populations under control all over the world. There's one problem. It can't tell the difference between an insect that harms your crops and one that helps them. To a mantis, there are no good insects or bad insects. There's only prey. So the same mantis that's just saved a plant from a caterpillar may, just a minute later, kill the insect responsible for putting fruit on your table. Yes, I'm talking about bees. The mantis simply positions itself beside a flower and waits. A bee arrives to collect nectar, lands directly in front of it, and a fraction of a second later, it's trapped between the mantis's spiked forelegs. The mantis doesn't care whether the bee is pollinating the plant or destroying it. The bee simply came too close. And sometimes the mantis doesn't even need to catch it. The mere presence of a predator near a flower may be enough to make bees avoid the area. That means the mantis doesn't just eat pollinators, it may also scare the others away from the plants. And that's the great deception. People see a mantis kill a caterpillar and call it a protector of crops. But a minute later, that same protector grabs a bee, an insect without which some of those crops would never grow at all. But now, the mantis itself is about to become the prey. And its killer won't even need to attack from the outside. It begins with a fly that has to get almost within striking distance of a young mantis. For the fly, it's a huge risk. One wrong move and the mantis will catch and eat it. But if the fly manages to deposit a larva on the host's body, the larva quickly burrows inside and makes its way into the abdomen. For a long time, the mantis notices nothing. It continues hunting, eating, and growing. But now, part of everything it catches is being taken by the creature inside it. The larva doesn't kill the mantis immediately, it needs the mantis alive as a moving supply of food. While healthy mantises continue to mature, the infected one begins to fall behind. Its development slows while the parasite grows
getting
larger.
eaten alive and he don't even know it.
No room left inside the abdomen. That's when the larva tears through the mantis's body wall and begins forcing its way out. The mantis may still be alive at this point. It twitches, arches its abdomen, and clings to the surface with its legs as an enormous larva slowly crawls out of its body. The larva
How is it
then
still
drops
alive?
to the ground and burrows into the soil, where it will later develop into a fly. And the praying mantis is left with an open wound, damaged tissue, and barely any strength. Most mantises die shortly after the parasite emerges. But here's the strangest part. Some survive, start moving again, and even begin eating.
I don't want to go outside no more.
Another month after the
What are you doing?
parasite came out.
It's crazy.
This is where the Chinese
glad I'm not
mantis
bugged.
becomes important again. It didn't kill those 57 insects, but while the fly prevented young native mantises from reaching adulthood, the larger newcomer was already taking over their hunting grounds and preying on those that did survive. The Chinese mantis first appeared in North America in 1896, most likely arriving in a shipment of plants to Pennsylvania. It was later deliberately bred and its egg cases were sold to gardeners. Person attaches one of these cases to a branch, and in spring, dozens of young mantises hatch and spread across the garden in search of prey. The problem is this isn't a controlled army. Chinese mantises don't patrol garden beds or target a particular pest. They sit in ambush and grab any animal of the right size. A caterpillar, a bee, a butterfly, or a native mantis. That makes them unpredictable and generally ineffective as a form of pest control. For the native Carolina mantis, the main problem is size. The Chinese mantis is the largest mantis in North America and can grow to around 4.7 inches long.
Who the hell released Chinese mantises in America?
And can eat its smaller native rival. But it's important to note that while experts believe the introduced species may be contributing to the decline of the Carolina mantis, the true scale of its impact is still difficult to determine. And that raises a question the study never answered. If this fly can wipe out almost an entire generation of native mantises, why doesn't it do the same thing to the Chinese ones? One possibility is that the parasite simply doesn't recognize them as suitable hosts. For the fly, it isn't enough to find just any mantis. It has to select the right host, the right species, age, and size with a body in which the larva can survive. Parasitic flies often have a limited host range because of differences in behavior, anatomy, and habitat. The Carolina mantis may have been a perfect match. Its young appeared at the right time, lived on the right plants, and reached the right size just as adult flies were searching for hosts. Chinese mantises may have developed at a different time, lived higher up on plants, or simply had bodies in which the larva couldn't develop as successfully. But these are only possible explanations. Scientists haven't proven that Chinese mantises are protected from this fly. They may also become infected, but those cases may simply have gone unnoticed. And if the Chinese mantis really was likely to become a host, it would have gained an enormous advantage. While the larvae stopped the native species from growing, the Chinese mantis continued to mature, reproduce, and take over the spaces left behind. Essentially, the parasitic fly was helping the introduced mantis. Although, honestly, it doesn't exactly look like it needed the help. Seriously, just compare them. Here's the native mantis, and here's the introduced Chinese mantis. This guy clearly doesn't need any help, but even if the Chinese mantis really had gained an advantage, it still couldn't afford to relax. Because mantises have a parasite that doesn't care whether its host is a native species or an outsider. It doesn't just need to grow inside its host, it needs to make the host willingly march to its death. This worm begins its life in water, but somehow ends up inside a land-dwelling insect. There it grows, coiling inside the abdomen and gradually becoming longer than the host itself, but it can't complete its life cycle on land. As an adult, the worm needs water again. And that's when the mantis does something it would never normally do. It leaves the grass, begins moving toward a gleaming surface, and enters the water. Not because it's thirsty, the parasite alters the mantis' response to light reflected from the water's surface. In experiments, infected mantises were far more likely to choose horizontally polarized light, the distinctive visual signature of a body of water. To a human, a pond simply glitters. To an infected mantis, that glitter becomes almost like a command. It approaches the edge and jumps. Once it's in the water, the worm begins emerging from its body, sometimes revealing itself to be many times longer than the mantis. The fly used its host as a living incubator, but this parasite goes even further. It uses the mantis's legs, its eyes, and its sense of direction. The mantis carries its own killer exactly where the parasite needs to go. One parasite grows inside the mantis, another rewrites its behavior. And meanwhile, humans continue selling mantises as
the whole time you feel like I gotta take a shit, but you can't shit.
But in fact, this predator is constantly being exploited by everything around it. It all begins not with larvae, but with adult females. After mating, each female produces a thick foam on a branch and seals dozens, sometimes hundreds of eggs inside it. Within minutes, the foam hardens into an ootheca, a tough egg capsule. For commercial sale, these egg cases are collected, sorted by species, and kept in cold storage so the mantises don't hatch too early. The buyer doesn't receive a single predator, but an entire future generation sealed inside a small brown lump. Once the egg capsule's moved into warmth, development speeds up. A few weeks later, tiny nymphs begin emerging all at once through narrow openings. They don't hatch as worms, and they don't pass through a pupal stage. Each one appears as a miniature version of an adult mantis. wingless but already equipped with grasping forelegs and ready to hunt. The first few hours are especially dangerous. Dozens of hungry predators suddenly find themselves crowded together, and there may not be enough suitable prey to go around. So some of the newborns begin grabbing and eating their own brothers and sisters. Cannibalism quickly continues as they grow, which is
Don't
why
eat
captive
me.
breeders must quickly separate young mantises or provide them with a large supply of tiny live prey. From there,
Are those babies?
grow in only
Or is it a
one
different
way,
type of
by shedding its tight exoskeleton.
mantis?
After every molt, its body becomes larger, the spikes on its front legs grow more powerful, and it begins taking down bigger prey. After
I can see how these could be aliens, gang. Like on their own planet, like if they just keep growing, like to our size, I believe.
But once the egg capsule opens, controlling that army becomes impossible. This is fascinating, and you can actually buy them. These egg capsules are sold online at garden centers and in farm and garden supply stores, usually marketed as natural pest control. They're purchased by gardeners, greenhouse owners, and operators of small farms. Using them is very simple. You attach the egg case to a branch or place it in a sheltered spot among the plants. In spring, young mantises hatch down from it and spread out across the property on their own. There's no need to feed them or release each one individually, but once they're out, there's no way to control what they'll prey on. So you use them at your own
I thought I saw one trying to eat his little sibling, gang. Oh, you stop it! Stop it now!
To control pests. In 1906, the parasitic fly Compsillera cancinida was released in North America to combat the spongy moth and the brown tail moth. But the fly turned out to be far too indiscriminate and began infecting many native caterpillars, including large Saturniid moths such as the Cecropia moth and other well-known nocturnal species. So the ability to kill a pest is only the first part of the test. What matters far more is proving that the new predator won't find some other prey it likes even better. You can stop using a chemical, but you can't recall a mantis, a fly, or a beetle once it's been released. If they survive their first winter and reproduce, the experiment's already escaped the lab. And I think you can imagine the consequences. They may be so unpredictable that it's almost better not to think about them at all. That's why scientists today are trying to create the opposite of a praying mantis. A killer that will do its job, but won't be able to remain in the wild forever. Of all the methods we know, I think sterile flies are among the most effective. They're bred on a massive scale, irradiated, and released by the millions. The males mate with wild females, but no offspring are produced.
This is even worse.
This is how the New World screwworm fly was driven out of North America. A parasite whose larvae eat the living tissue of animals. Sterile flies are still being released today to maintain a protective barrier in Panama. And while working on this script, I discovered that the story still wasn't over. For decades, people in Panama maintained a wall of sterile flies to prevent this dangerous parasite from moving north out of South America toward the United States. But the parasite broke through the barrier. Outbreaks first appeared in Panama, then spread into neighboring countries and eventually reached Mexico. As a result, this living line of defense now has to be urgently moved closer and closer to the U.S. border. But this is also where the story brings us back to
Y'all just scientifically releasing flies created in labs. It's crazy,
after they're
man.
released. With mantises, it's the exact opposite. Their egg capsules can survive transportation, endure the winter, and end up thousands of miles from where they were laid. That's how the Chinese mantis arrived in America almost 130 years ago. And now, nearly the same scenarios unfolding in Europe. Except this time, scientists already know what such an invasion can lead to. We're talking about two large Asian species, Hierodula tenodentata and Hierodula patellifera. Until recently, their presence was treated as a series of isolated accidental sightings, but now it's clear they aren't merely surviving, they're reproducing and establishing stable populations across different parts of Europe. And their greatest weapon isn't even their size. A single egg capsule can produce around 200 young mantises, nearly twice as many as the native European species. What's more, young Asian mantises are less likely to eat one another, which means that far more predators from a single egg case may survive to adulthood. While the native species is still struggling to rebuild its population after winter, the newcomer's already releasing an entire army into the same territory. Adult mantises don't even need to cross Europe. A female attaches a small ootheca to a branch, a wooden structure, a piece of garden furniture, or a plant. That object is loaded into a car, train, or truck. A few weeks later, in another country, hundreds of young predators emerge from the nearly invisible capsule. Researchers believe the giant Asian mantis has spread so quickly largely because of international trade and transportation. Then people unknowingly help it a second time. Newly introduced species often thrive in cities and suburbs where temperatures are warmer, severe freezes are less common, and insects gather around streetlights every night. It's an almost perfect environment. During the day, the mantis hides among bushes or against a wall. In the evening, it takes up a position near an artificial light source where prey fly straight to it. As the climate gets warmer, more and more regions that were once too cold for the species to
I feel like a
reproduce
praying mantis is
reliably
watching me right now,
suitable
bro.
habitats. And now, for the first time, it's becoming clear that Europe may be
can just
heading
feel it.
down the same path as North America. First, there's a rare sighting, then a few egg capsules, then a stable, self-sustaining generation. And by the time people notice that native mantises are disappearing, the invasive species may already have established itself in dozens of new cities. But the strangest part of the European story is that one invader may be stopped by another. Researchers collected more than 2,300 observations of Asian praying mantises across Europe and noticed something. Among the few animals that regularly attack these large predators, hornets stand out in particular. In other words, a mantis capable of killing native insects, lizards, and even small frogs can itself become prey to another giant hunter. And this creates an unusual conflict. The Asian hornet is also spreading across Europe, another non-native species transported by humans and another serious threat to local insects. So the ecosystem may end up pitting two invaders against each other. That doesn't mean anyone's deliberately releasing hornets to control the mantises. Nothing like that's happening. But in fact, one invasive predator may be able to keep another in check, but you can't know beforehand which species will actually benefit. A hornet may kill an Asian mantis and reduce the number of offspring it produces. But that same hornet also kills bees and other native insects. A mantis may eat a hornet, but afterward it'll simply continue hunting local wildlife. So Europe is no longer dealing with a simple invader versus native species scenario. Several non-native predators may now occupy the same territory, feeding on local animals, competing with one another, and occasionally killing each other.
Okay, there we go.
Scientists are now observing a war where no matter which invader wins, the outcome could be bad news. But to understand how the mantis is able to adapt so quickly to new prey, researchers had to do something that sounds like a joke. They fitted it with a tiny pair of 3D glasses. Researchers put a praying mantis in front of a screen and showed it computer-generated insects. A different colored filter was positioned over each eye, making the image appear closer or farther away. Whenever the virtual prey seemed to move within striking distance, the mantis thrust out its grasping forelegs, even though there was nothing in front of it but a flat screen. But what researchers discovered next was even stranger. A praying mantis perceives depth very differently from a human. Our brain compares the details in two images and uses the differences between them to build a three-dimensional picture of the world. A mantis barely cares whether those details match. Instead, it focuses mainly on how an object changes and moves in each eye. It can be surrounded by visual chaos in which a human wouldn't see a single coherent object, but if one part of that chaos moves as though prey were within striking distance, the mantis attacks. In fact, it doesn't need an accurate three-dimensional model of its surroundings. It only needs the answer to one question: is it close enough to grab? That's why its vision is both more primitive than ours and perfectly suited for killing. A mantis doesn't waste energy trying to understand the entire scene. It isolates a moving target from the surrounding world and calculates the one precise moment to strike. Researchers believe this principle could help engineers create simpler vision systems for small robots that lack the processing power required for complex calculations. But this is exactly where it becomes clear why
I'm so confused right now.
is such a poor choice for protecting crops.
Why did his eyes look like
Its
that?
vision is perfectly designed to answer one question: can I grab this thing? But it has no way of answering another: should I kill it? To a mantis, a bee, a butterfly, a native mantis, or an actual pest is simply a moving target within striking distance. For more than a century, people have experimented with giant mantises, parasitic flies, worms, sterile insects, and entire living barriers, but every time they've run into the same problem. A living weapon has no idea whose side it's supposed to be on. That native Mississippi mantis didn't die only because of the larva growing inside it. It had become trapped in a system where every organism was exploiting another. The fly used its body, the worm manipulated its behavior, the Chinese mantis occupied the space it left behind, and humans tried to use all of them at once. But there's one more detail that makes this system almost impossible to control. Every participant operates on a different time scale. A mantis kills in a fraction of a second, a larva develops inside it over the course of weeks, an egg capsule can survive through an entire winter, and the consequences of a single failed release can remain for decades. A person sees only every single action, attaching an egg capsule to a branch, releasing a beneficial insect, carrying a plant across a border, but nature continues the chain long after that person has stepped away. One mantis eats something it was never meant to target, one parasite switches to a new host, one unnoticed egg capsule ends up in another city.
Don't eat it, bro.
After several generations, it becomes almost impossible to trace the entire chain back to the decision that started it. And the most dangerous part is not even that a mantis might kill a bee or a native competitor. The greater danger is that the result may initially look like a success. Pest numbers really do fall. A gardener sees a predator sitting on a plant and assumes the method is working, but they don't see the pollinator that'll never return to that flower. They don't see the native mantis eaten in the bushes nearby. They don't see the parasite already growing inside the next host. The problem becomes visible only when all those small, isolated changes begin to form one larger picture. Native species decline. Introduced species take their place. Parasites find new hosts, and people are forced to introduce yet another living organism to repair the damage caused by the one released before it. That's how the simple idea of releasing a predator to control pests turns into a chain in which one animal is used to control another, then a third is introduced to restrain the second, only for people to discover that a fourth organism has been exploiting both of them all along. And somewhere at the very beginning of that chain is the same native mantis. It doesn't know which insects humans consider beneficial, it doesn't know that a larger competitor has appeared nearby, and it certainly doesn't understand that a larva is growing inside its body. It simply detects movement, judges the distance, and prepares to strike. But this time, the real prey is the mantis itself. Because in nature, even the perfect killer may fail to notice the enemy that's already inside it.